Welcome to the WUVT Sports Roundtable. I'm your host, David Cunningham, joined by my partners Grant Atkinson and Wyatt Krueger here in the WUVT Network Studios in downtown Blacksburg. We're talking all kinds of sports today, everything Virginia Tech athletics and Hokies football, along with college football, the NFL, and maybe a little bit of college basketball and Major League Baseball if we have time. To start, Grant and Wyatt, how are you guys doing today?
Doing good, David. Rough weekend, obviously, for Tech. It's hard to have a positive outlook after a loss like that, but I don't know. I think we're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But seriously, when we're talking about Fuente, I think we really just need to talk about the quarterback position. Willis really just hasn't developed. He doesn't look better from last year. I guess he made his debut a year ago today or yesterday, but. Yeah, really, that's a highlight. No one else has been able to step up behind him. But yeah, seriously, we're gonna have to look at the quarterback position when we're talking about Fuente, and that's really the issue that I'm focusing on.
Grant, how are you doing on this Sunday?
I'm pretty good. I don't know. I feel like it's gotten to the point where like after a loss like that, I'm just more like, which is bad. I think because it's like.
You're not surprised.
I'm not even surprised. I'm not even like
phased
as
anymore.
frustrated as I used to be, which is like kind of sad place to be, but it's like, whatever. So, I'm fine.
We're getting used to losing.
So, Virginia Tech football lost their second game of the season on Friday at home against Duke. They lost 45-10. They led 3-0 after the first quarter and only allowed 5 total yards to Duke in that first quarter. But what did you guys think overall about the team's performance? You don't have to grade them, but just overall thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually really surprised McLeese was able to get the ground game going. He had 100 yards rushing. He was averaging about 6 yards per carry, and they really were looking like they were trying to focus on that. But just no rhythm, no tempo from the offense. The defense, they do what they can, but just when the offense just continues to put them in bad spots, and that's just not what you need. And Bud Foster, I mean, he's got his work cut out for him, but you had that fumble in the first quarter, and just the turnovers pile up, and the game just got out of hand.
I think the defense kind of gets the short end of the stick because they played really well in the first quarter. They allowed, I think it was 5 yards in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. Played really well. And then after that turnover, when Hooker and King kind of messed up that exchange, and Duke ended up getting it inside the Tech 20-yard line, things went south really quickly, and I think that the defense obviously needs to respond better when something like that happens. I think they kind of folded, and then that kind of changed the momentum of the game. But I think a lot of the problem is the offensive side of the ball, and the defense kind of gets the short end of the stick because you look at the score and it's 45-10, and you're like, oh, what happened? But the offense does not put the defense in position to succeed, and it's really hard as a defense when your offense is out there going 3 and out, turning the ball over, never getting across the 50-yard line. It's hard to continue coming out there and playing defense. They're tired. They're giving Duke the ball in good field position, and it's difficult for them. So I feel for Bud Foster in the defense.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway. And I think I said something like that during the game because in the first quarter, Tech had 2 possessions on offense where they got the ball at the 40-yard line and at the 50-yard line. And on those 2 drives, they came away with a total of 3 points. And I said, if you get in good field position, I mean, that was the 2 best field position we had all night. You get in those field positions, great field position, you've got to score. You have to put points up on the board so your defense isn't defending for their life every single possession. And Tech only got 3 points out of it, and I said, your offense has to help your defense because if your offense doesn't help your defense, then you're leaving your defense stranded, and that's what happened. And the Hokies allowed 5 yards. The Hokies defense allowed 5 total yards in the first quarter. Through the next 3 quarters, they allowed 417 yards. And part of it, you can say, is their youth, their inexperience, but part of it also is they just got beat up. And it's time and time again, the offense isn't putting any points up on the board. And eventually, you're going to get into these games where if Tech had an offense, it would be a shootout. But Tech doesn't have an offense that can put points up on the board, or at least they haven't showed it. And you're getting into these spots where your defense gives up 30, 40 points a game, and your offense can't put up more than 10. I think the biggest thing is it's the offense, and it's Fuente needs to look at, like you said, Wyatt, his quarterback, and needs to reevaluate Cornelsen, reevaluate their play calling, because something's obviously not going right. What do you guys think the problems are with the team right now, and how would you go about changing it?
I think problem number one, as Wyatt said, is the quarterback position, and I don't think that it's all on Ryan Willis. I think it's the way that the quarterback position has been managed by this coaching staff. Ryan Willis has strength and he has weaknesses, and the coaching staff is not putting him in a position where his strength can shine. They're putting him into an offense where his weaknesses are going to come out, because the things that he's not good at, running the read option, throwing short passes, having to read the linebackers, having to read the defense, is the things they're trying to make him do, and that's just not what he's good at. He's good at launching the ball downfield. He's good at an air raid offense. Mm-hmm. And when he throws the ball downfield, you can see his talent. I mean, when he threw that touchdown to Hazleton, his first game back, that was good to see, even though it was already 31-3 at that point. So it didn't change the outcome of the game, but it shows you the talent that he has and where he can shine. And yet, for some reason, the coaching staff is not giving him those opportunities. So it's really mind-boggling to me. Like, when I watch the offense, I'm like what is going through the coach's head when they're calling the plays? I don't understand it. It's really, they don't put this team in a position to succeed, and that's the most frustrating thing to me. Is, if we're a bad team, we're a bad team. But I think we have a lot of talent, especially on offense, and it's just not showing up. The lack of offensive production is obviously a problem in and of itself, but the fact that when I think about all the talent we have on this team, mm-hmm. coupled with the fact that there's no production on offense, it doesn't make sense to me.
Definitely, and I think just to piggyback off that, it's when you see it's the second week in a row, at least I've seen them just come out flat and just not be able to get into rhythm, and it's on the coach, it's on Fuente, it's on that offensive staff to make adjustments, to find something that you guys are doing right, and they really just can't, and they can't get into a rhythm. The players they're not in space. I feel like we could run some hurry up, do something, but they really just look like they don't have any answers, and it sucks to see.
Yeah, Ryan Willis was asked after the game by one of the reporters, do you know what's wrong with this offense? And Willis said, I don't. And I think part of that falls on Fuente and Cornelsen. I think if they're going to... If the reporter, obviously, it's not a terrible question to ask, but that's also more of a question for the head coach, for the mm-hmm. assistant coach that's the offensive coordinator. They should have the answers. And, but I'm very surprised. Will said, I don't know. And I think I don't want to put all the blame on him, because I think part of it is he's made silly mistakes, bad errors, but part of it is the coaching staff hasn't put him in the best place to succeed. And then besides that, the offense itself has just looked, like you said, slow, lackadaisical. They say they run up tempo, but it's
a slow up tempo.
It's slow up tempo. Run up to the line and look over to the sideline, waste 10 seconds, and then go. It's not a fast pace at all. And like you said, they came out very flat-footed. They didn't look like they were ready to play. I bet they are ready to play, but they didn't show it. Do you guys have any bright spots or any positive takeaways? Was there any besides maybe Oscar Bradburn in the punting game? We were joking on Twitter during the game that he's the best player the Hokies have had all season.
Really?
Yeah, I think that Oscar Bradburn should just permanently get the 25, because special teams, along with the other two phases of the game, but they're pretty abysmal. I guess Hezzy had that one pretty good return that set us up pretty well, and then if I remember correctly, we didn't do anything off of it, or maybe we got a field goal or something, but it wasn't much. We definitely didn't score a touchdown off of it. And I don't know, our special teams, our punt coverage has been bad. There's times when, you see a guy, one of our players, right on whoever's returning, and you're like, why aren't they calling a fair catch? And then our guy just completely whiffs, and you're like, oh, that's why they didn't call a fair catch. It's like teams know it. Teams know that we're struggling in all three phases of the game, and that's another thing that's really sad to see, especially, I know it's been talked about, but with the 1999 team there, with Frank Beamer there, and you think about the legacy that he created on special teams, it seems like that's completely gone. I don't remember the last time the Hokies had some great big special teams play that changed the momentum of the game. Like, it just doesn't happen anymore. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's sad. I think that Oscar was good. I think another positive would be a couple players returning from injury. Hazelton getting some time. Garbett, although he looked like he got banged up again at the end of the game. I'm not sure what his status is, but to see them back in was encouraging, I guess. Yeah, that's really all I got.
Really, also, I mean, seeing the defense in that first quarter, they really were flying. They were flying around to the ball, and it looked like Duke was about to have no answers. But I don't know, players just started getting wide open. And also, I wanted to ask you guys, like, what was the deal with Hendon Hooker, like, getting in for a few plays? Like, did Fuente say anything about that after the game?
Yeah. So Fuente said he and the staff came into the game, and they agreed that they were going to try to use. They had packages planned for all three quarterbacks, and Hooker had his package. You saw Quincy Patterson had his one or two plays, but I guess they're just sticking with Willis. I mean, that's one of those questions where, Fuente, you ask Fuente that question, and Fuente doesn't really answer it.
Yeah.
Somebody jokingly had texted me and asked me, hey, you should ask Fuente if Willis is going to be the quarterback for Miami. And I said, I don't think there's a point, because I'm not going to get anything out of that question. Until Fuente says he's going to a different quarterback, he showed in the game that he was sticking with Willis. There's no point in me asking that question. I think the spot, Hendon Hooker, if there was if there was not that miscue on that read with Keyshawn King that caused a fumble that was picked up by Duke, I think he would have gotten a little bit more time. But overall, Willis is Fuente's guy. And like we said, the frustrating thing is, and a lot of people have said this, it's like trying to fit a square screw peg into a circle hole. I mean, it just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
You're trying to fit an offense that Willis isn't the best in around Willis, and it doesn't look good. But to go off what Grant said about the 1999 team earlier, the historic 1999 Virginia Tech football team was in attendance. About 20, 25 members were honored at halftime. And it seemed kind of weird, and a lot of people on social media and were complaining that it just didn't feel right. I mean, this is one of the biggest, sports teams in Tech athletics history, and they were honored like someone who would honor a golf team. What did you guys think of that?
I thought it was really cool. I didn't know Michael Vick was there. Just seeing him there, but really it was really a casual thing. And Fuente said they hadn't talked to him, and really that's just like speaks to like the culture part of Fuente. I think he hasn't really established a culture, and that's one of the biggest issues. But I wanted to ask you guys where you guys see the season going from here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that Fuente doesn't have a culture. He hasn't established a culture, and he admitted that after the game. Like, they said, what's your offensive culture? He said, I don't know. Like, we're inconsistent passing the ball, we're inconsistent running the ball. Like, that's on me. He says that after every game. That's on me. Like, okay, yeah, it is on you. Like, what are you going to do about it? I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any effort from him to try to establish some sort of culture, which is disappointing. And I think it just kind of culminated with the fact that the 99 team is there. They were honored like some lacrosse team at halftime or something. It was like one thing.
Yeah, and not to diss those programs.
No,
but this is a team that brought the whole national spotlight.
Right.
I mean, they went to the national championship game. This is a team that completely changed the face of Virginia Tech.
And I think it's like a lot of people on Twitter were talking about, let's have 1999 end zones or like throwback uniforms, something like that, and it didn't happen. And it's like that's not that big a deal in and of itself, but I think it just shows like I don't think Fuente fully understands the culture of Virginia Tech. Like if he had made a big deal out of it, he says, "Oh, let's paint the end zones different, or let's get new jerseys or something." Like that's a small thing, but it would have gotten the fans hype, and it would have honored the team, and it would have made people feel like we're respecting this team and we're realizing what they've done. And I just think he doesn't fully understand the culture and how important it is to our fans.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what really sucks about all of this, is because I feel like Tech football, just with Beamer and everything, that was what Tech football was, a culture of its own, and that's why the fan base grew so much. That's why we're a big college, like a huge college football town, even though we haven't been that good the past 2 years. But it sucks to see that go. But where do you guys see overall? Like, do you see this season just continuing to crash and burn? Do you see any hope for Fuente down the road?
Personally, I mean, I was talking with a couple of my friends at dinner last night, and and that was going to be my next question: is how many wins do you guys see? I see. I mean, at least Rhode Island, maybe. I'd say 3 or 4. Maybe you'd have to change. I mean, there'd have to be a big change to get to 5. I think Rhode Island, is a lock. I would hope so. And Grant laughs, but I mean, at this point, like, we were Tech's trailing 14-3 to Furman at halftime. I mean, what, like,
there are no locks. Yeah,
it's not out of the question. I think Georgia Tech will be a toss-up, but I think Tech loses all the other games. I mean, I think Tech is. I don't know if Tech's going to be favored in another game this season besides Rhode Island. I don't know, what you think, or what you think, but there's something that has to change. I mean, this is not Virginia Tech football, and like Wyatt said, I don't think Fuente understands Virginia Tech football culture at all, and that's one of the problems.
Yeah, I agree. I tweeted after Pitt beat UCF last week that I didn't know if the Hokies were going to get an ACC win this year. And people were like, "Oh, you're overreacting, blah blah blah." And I probably was a little bit, because I think they will get 1 or 2. My prediction would be we'll go 4-8. We'll beat Rhode Island, and we'll beat maybe Georgia Tech, or maybe we pull out one that we don't really deserve to win. But I don't see us being over 500 in any scenario. I don't see how that could possibly happen. People saying the bowl streak isn't dead yet. Like, if you can find 5 wins left on this schedule, like, I'm interested to see them, because I don't think it's going to happen. I think 4-8 is probably what I expect. If we go 5-7, maybe I feel a little bit better, depending on who we beat. But it's just, I don't see us continuing the bowl streak. I don't see us beating UVA, and I think we'll get 1. Maybe 2 ACC wins if we're lucky, but I just don't see any scenario where we are 7-5 or better.
Yeah, I think the fan base really. I feel like it's been showed, especially on social media especially after the Duke game. That was our biggest loss since 2007. You said before.
Yeah.
And just the fan base doesn't believe in Fuente. I feel like the best move here would just to in terms of establishing a culture is getting a young new coach in, establish something new.
That was leading into my next question. Virginia Tech last year had its first below 500 season since the beginning of the Frank Beamer era. If Fuente has to win 7 games to make it to a bowl. That's win 5 of the next 8. You only have 3 losses, and you play 3 ranked teams. You play Wake Forest, Notre Dame, and Virginia,
North Carolina,
and North Carolina, like Wyatt said, is on the come up. So I don't think you make a bowl. Becoming 500 would be a stretch. I mean, that would be a drastic change has to happen. If Fuente doesn't win more than 5 games, I mean, what happens? I think you have to start with something with the offensive coordinator. But I mean, where do you go?
I don't like rooting for losing. I never agree with that. I never think that when fans say that it's a good idea. but I do see the argument that maybe if Tech goes 3-9, it's better than if they go 5-7 in the sense that it will force them to do something. Because if the Hokies go 5-7, I can easily see Witt kind of sitting back, saying, "We'll give it another season, see what happens," because 5-7 is not like completely embarrassing. I mean, for this program, it is, and it's something that is unprecedented in the last 26 years. But I think that it's a lot easier to say that after 5-7 than if you go 3-9. If you go 3-9, then Witt's going to have to do something. Either it'll be like telling Fuente you need to make changes on the offensive staff. I mean, something will have to be done. Whereas if we go 5-7, I wouldn't be surprised if not much is done besides just some small position coaches or anything like that. So I think if the Hokies do end up only beating Rhode Island and not getting another win, the silver lining could be that like changes will have to be made.
Yeah. And here's my next question. I know Wyatt's prepared for this. Do you think it should be Fuente is out now, or do you think it should be Fuente has to make changes and you give him another year because the buyout is so big? And I know fans think that, scraping up $15 million is doable, and I'm not saying it isn't, but Grant, do you think, and I know Wyatt's prepared to answer this question, but do you think that it should be Fuente has to win a certain amount of games to keep his job, or Fuente is going to be here next season?
I think that's an interesting question because what I think about is at what point does paying that $15 million buyout cost less than the money that you're costing this program by losing these games? I mean, you're losing fans, and it's not just the bad attendance. It's not just the fact that we had whatever it was, 51,000 against Furman or anything like that. It's like this is more permanent. If your program continues to look like this and the fans continue to see nothing being done, like you're losing fans for more than just this year. Like it's going to take a lot to win them back after a season like this. So I think the question is, at what point are you losing more money based on fan support, based on all those other factors by not paying the buyout? And I think that maybe the first step would be to say, Fuente, you got to fire Cornelsen. I know you love Cornelsen. You guys came over here together. You've been with him, but like something has to be done. It's not working, and you have to fire him. And maybe at that point, that could be a solution because then the fans see something's being done. Maybe that wins a little bit of their heart back. You don't have to pay the $15 million buyout right away. Then you see if that changes. That would maybe be my first step if the Hokies continue to lose and, they're going to the UVA game. They're like 3-8 or something like that. And I think maybe you say you need to do something about Brad, and then you save some money as far as the buyout, and then you at least show that you're doing something. But on the other hand, like I think that if this continues, at some point you got to just pull the trigger because the further that Fuente drives the program into the ground, the harder it's going to be to get out of it later.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think just it's been like a steady decline since he's gotten here, and you really don't want to let it spin out of control. And he obviously has some opportunities this year to, like, you could pull off a miracle win against UVA. You could show up against Notre Dame on the road. Obviously, I don't think those things are going to happen, but he has chances, and I guess he's going to keep getting them. I feel like Witt has his mind made up if he's games pointed out that he's going to look at, or if he's just going to wait to the end of the season and look at everything as a whole. But really, you don't want to lose an entire locker room, and that's what they feel like they have to monitor really closely this I mean, if the players are going to quit on him, then there's no point in having him. And like you said, it's going to be harder to build, even harder to build this program back up if we just keep letting the losses stack, the players and the culture just decline as a whole.
One of my friends mentioned this to me. If something happens, because you have to change defensive coordinators after this season anyway, because Bud Foster's retiring. If something happens in the middle of the season or towards the end of the season where Brad Cornelsen is gone, it's going to be so difficult to try to bring in an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator into a situation that doesn't look positive. you go 3-9, and who wants to come to Blacksburg to be your next offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pressing question. But I mean, Tech's got another game this week. The Hokies travel to Miami this upcoming weekend. The Hurricanes had an open week this past week. The game is slated for 3:30 next Saturday on ESPN. How important is this game? And in terms of evaluating this team, what can this team prove in this game?
This game is it's important. Miami is a really good team, and I feel like they are definitely one of the best teams that Tech has played this far. So really just in terms of like grading and looking at where this team is at, the Miami game is going to be huge because we'll know if they really have quit on this season in the Miami game. And the players aren't going to say that. I know a lot of them after the game, they said they're really trying, and a lot of things just aren't working their way. But the Miami game will really be an indicator on the rest of the season, I feel like.
And I think it's a really big game for the offense, too, because Miami's defense is one of the best in the country. Their offense obviously has some struggles, which I think our defense can take advantage of if the offense can put them in a position to do so. And I think if the offense has a good day against Miami, they score 21, 24 points, I think we feel a lot better about where they're at, especially against a defense like that. And it puts us in a position where maybe even if we don't win the game, it's not a blowout. Our defense is able to make some stops and keep it close. Whereas if our offense just sputters and does what they did against Duke, I think we're going to get the same result. So it's a really big game for the offense to see, can they show the talent they have? Can they show the potential they have? And at this point, I think that Cornelison and Fuente have no reason to not coach like their jobs depend on it. Like I don't want to see any more of the conservative play calling, the running up the middle every first down. I don't know what that benefits at this point because you have nothing to lose, basically.
I would like to add, though, look what Miami did in the past 3 years. They hired Mark Richt from Georgia. 2 years in, things did not look like they were going well, a lot like Tech and Fuente, right? They hired a young coach. It looks like he's at least establishing a culture. Like the players really seem to like Manny Diaz. So I feel like that as a whole, if Miami comes out and just destroys Tech, that'll be something to look at as an indicator. Like, hey, make the change. But yeah.
We've got about 30 minutes left in our show, but before we continue, this is a reminder that you are listening to WUVT 90.7 FM Blacksburg. Now, before we get into the rest of Tech athletics, I want to talk about Virginia Tech men's basketball for a second. On Friday, the Hokies were in a recruiting battle with Duke for Henry Coleman, a four-star forward from Richmond, Virginia. Coleman chose Duke over Virginia Tech, but Mike Young and his staff have been pretty solid on the recruiting trail since being hired in April. What are your takeaways from Coleman's commitment?
I'm sure a lot of people know about my infamous tweet when Kerry Blackshear decided that he was going to go to Florida about how I didn't like the Mike Young hire and he hadn't checked off any of the boxes, blah, blah, blah. And he's really proved me wrong since then, which I'm happy about. My number one question with him was recruiting. We know he can coach. We've seen what he did at Wofford and the way that he got his players to play. So that wasn't really an issue for me. The issue was, does he know how to recruit at a level such as the ACC? And so far he's shown that he does. I think that it would be easy to say, oh, we lost Coleman, like I'm going to be depressed about that. And I saw a lot of tweets like, oh, the Hokies took 2 L's to Duke on Friday. But I didn't really feel that way. I felt like it was really kind of extraordinary that we were even in the running for Coleman.
Exactly.
And I think that, every crystal ball pretty much had him going to Duke, which I expected. But the fact that we're basically in the final 2 for a guy like that in a year where Mike Young hasn't even coached a game yet just shows his potential and how well that he can recruit, especially if, we have a decent season this year. I'm not saying we have to make the tournament or we have to, be in the top of the ACC or anything like that. But if we have a decent year this year and he shows that he has the capabilities to put together a good team, then I think that will really help continue the momentum in recruiting.
Yeah, Mike Young really, I feel like he's just had a lot of animosity for no reason. I mean, the Tech fans loved Buzz, and we fell in love with Buzz. And obviously he moves on, and Mike Young comes in, and everyone's just like, oh, it's the Wofford coach. Like, who is this guy? No one really knows him. But he's really just come. He's got a great staff. Like you said, the fact that we're even in the running for a guy like Henry Coleman says a lot. And I'm really optimistic about this basketball team. I think we're going to be a really gritty team. He knows how to coach defense. He knows we're gonna be able to score. But there's gonna be some growing pains, obviously, with just how much young talent there is. It sucks how many people we lost, but really I'm excited about Mike Young this year.
Yeah, I think that was my big takeaway was Mike Young's been here since barely beginning of April, and he's already got 2 commits for the 2020 class, 2 solid kids. He flipped one of them. One of them was committed to Northwestern, and he's a 4-star shooting guard from Richmond, and Mike Young flipped him. So he's done solid so far. He did say at the beginning that his strengths were coaching on the court and his weaknesses were the recruiting. And he said he would bring in a staff that was confident and that could recruit. And he retained Christian Webster from Buzz Williams' staff. He brought in Antoine Jackson and Chester Frazier. And he brought in Ace Custis 2 weeks ago. He's bringing in guys that know how to recruit, and I think he's done a great job so far.
Yeah, I think that Ace Custis hire was really big, and it's something that I know we're done talking about football. I don't want to go back to it, but it's something that the Fuente staff and regime has not done, which is hire former players who could be eligible. Maybe they have in a couple of senses, but there's a couple of chances that they had to do that and they didn't, and fans were kind of upset about that. I think the fact that Mike Young comes in and he makes a big move like that, it shows that, he understands the history, he understands the culture of Virginia Tech, or at least he's giving off the vibe that he does, and hopefully we'll continue to see that. But I think that's a big move just morale-wise for the team and for the fan base to show, like, I'm here, I'm at Tech, and I'm ready to go. Yeah,
Ace Custis is one of 4 former Hokie men's basketball players to have his jersey hanging in the rafters. So that was obviously a big coaching move. Custis was a former coach at University of Maryland Eastern Shore over near where he grew up. But yeah, like you said, they did bring in Pearson Prelu as on the defensive side. He's a former defensive back, but there haven't been too many of those hires. Now we're going to get into the rest of Tech athletics. Women's soccer is back in action currently in Clemson, South Carolina, against the Tigers. At halftime, the 9th-ranked Tigers lead 1-0 from a goal in the 8th minute from Caroline Conti. The 16th-ranked Hokies are 9-1, on the season after falling to number 1 Virginia 2-0 on Thursday evening in Charlottesville. After today's match, the Hokies will return to Thompson Field next Sunday to host number 10 Duke. The 18th-ranked men's soccer team drew 2-2 with Boston College on Friday in their 3rd ACC match of the season. Tech led 2-1 against a 10-men Boston College side with less than 10 seconds left in regulation, but a goal by the Eagles' Joe Kellett sent the match into overtime where neither team scored. Tech's record overall is 5-2-1 on the season. They are 0-2-1 in ACC play, and they host Gardner-Webb on Tuesday before traveling to Clemson for their 4th ACC game of the season next Saturday. Virginia Tech's volleyball team fell in 4 sets to Virginia on Friday in Charlottesville, giving the Hokies their 7th loss of the season. Match time for Tech's match today at number 4 Pittsburgh is slated for 4 p.m. It's the home opener in the ACC for the Panthers, who hold a 12-1 record on the season. And finally, Tech's softball team played their first 2 fall ball games at Tech Softball Park yesterday afternoon against Southwest Virginia Community College and Emory and Henry, while the lacrosse team played their first 3 games of their fall season at Mosley Practice Field in Blacksburg against Longwood, VCU, and Davidson. So the men's soccer team, the women's soccer team, they started off very, very hot. I've seen a couple of losses and draws in ACC play recently, but they're trying to get back on that mark. Any takeaway? Any thoughts about the Olympic sports right now?
Yeah, I went to the men's soccer game on Friday before the football game, and it was kind of disappointing because I think that Boston College is the whole ACC is good, but they're one of the teams in the ACC that the Hokies should beat, rather easily compared to other ACC teams who are in the top 10. and it just looked like the Hokies weren't 100% there. Boston College had a lot of possession in the first half, and even though the Hokies scored the first goal, they let the Eagles score relatively soon after in the first half, and it was tied 1-1 at halftime. And like you said, the Eagles were down to 10 men. They got a red card in the first half because one of their players basically kicked a Hokie right in the face, and he started bleeding. And they originally called it a yellow card, and they reviewed it and decided it was a red card, which I thought was kind of a questionable call because I didn't really see any intent. I thought it was a good yellow, but shouldn't be a red. But, that was kind of a break that the Hokies got. They got to play 11 on 10 for, 3/4 of the game, and then they aren't able to pull out a win, especially when they were up 2-1, and then they give up a late goal. It was kind of frustrating because it was a game that the Hokies really could have used a win in after they've had a couple of tough ACC matchups so far, and they didn't get it. So I thought that was tough.
Yeah, the women's team, too. I mean, they started off really hot, obviously, but they have an absolute gauntlet of a schedule to start ACC play. They play three top 10 teams, 4 top 10 teams 4 weeks in a row. I know we're dealing with injuries right now, but it's going to be a tough stretch for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, the women's soccer team was undefeated. They were 9-0 heading into Charlottesville on Thursday. 4 minutes into the game, Emily Gray, one of the better players in Tech's league scorer, the sophomore midfielder, she was hurt. I'm just speculating. It looks like a torn ACL. I've heard it was her knee. I have not gotten it confirmed, but that's disappointing because she's one of the better players. Chugger Adair called her the workhorse on the team. She's one of the best players on the team, and that really changes how the Hokies have to play. But like you said, it's a tough stretch going forward, and Chugger Adair always praises the ACC. The Hokies have number 10 Duke next Saturday after facing number 9 Clemson today and number 1 Virginia, and then they have number 6 Florida State the following Thursday. So they've got a gauntlet of a schedule, but Chugger Adair says that's why they play 3 SEC teams in the non-conference at the beginning of the season. So I think it's a positive outlook on the women's side. On the men's side, it's more of a steady outlook, I would say. Mike Bresentine's side needs to win or get a good result in one ACC game for me to gain more confidence in them. They are 0-2-1 in ACC play. They led in all 3 games, and North Carolina scored 3 unanswered goals in their first game. Louisville scored 2 unanswered goals in their second game, and Boston College evened it up. Tech pulled ahead again, and then Boston College scored with 10 seconds left to send it into a draw. So men's soccer team has some work to do. And then for the other sports, volleyball, they've got a more difficult schedule. Jill Wilson's still trying to build up this program. And then lacrosse and softball, they're obviously not until the spring. They're just starting their fall camps right now.
Yeah, a lot of programs are dealing with injuries. I know that one of the better players on the volleyball team, Tessa Weiner, is out with a concussion right now. Talked about Emily Gray. I know we've had issues in football, obviously, with some injuries. So, yeah, the injury bug seems to have kind of bitten a little bit, and I guess that happens every year. But it just seems like, in particular, some of the better players on some of those Olympic sports have gone out due to injuries, some of them worse than others. So hopefully they'll be able to get back soon because they all pretty much had a good start to the season, especially the 2 soccer teams and the volleyball team. Even though they have lost a good amount of games, they looked promising and they looked pretty good in a lot of their opening matches. So I think, hopefully we'll be able to get healthy again and get some of that momentum back.
So now we will transition into college football. Did you guys have a chance to watch college football yesterday?
Yeah, a lot of good games on yesterday.
Some of the games I'm going to highlight: Clemson, North Carolina, which finished Clemson winning 21-20. North Carolina scored in the last few minutes, went for a 2-point conversion. Instead of throwing or running up the middle, they ran an option. Clemson stopped it, and Clemson got the win in Chapel Hill. Virginia Notre Dame was a solid game. The Irish pulled away 35-20. Ohio State-Nebraska was the game in Lincoln where College Game Day was at yesterday. The Buckeyes won 48-7, and in the ACC, I watched this game for a little bit. I thought this was an interesting game. Wake Forest beating Boston College 24-27. Wake Forest is a fairly solid team. What was the best game you watched from yesterday, and what are your biggest takeaways from yesterday?
Yeah, definitely that Clemson North Carolina game was incredible. I don't understand the play calling at the end and going for two. You run a speed option and you just pretty much just take away 1.5 of the field. That just doesn't really make sense to me. But either way, it's crazy how you see like Clemson had a tough game against Syracuse last year, and it's like these close games with teams that really should not be competing with them. Like the talent levels are insanely different, but Clemson always finds a way to win those games. But one of my biggest takeaways was Tua Tagovailoa, 500 yards and 6 touchdowns yesterday. He looks like the Heisman. Trevor Lawrence didn't look that good. Jalen Hurts looks like a Heisman candidate. He was incredible. Auburn too. I had this question for you guys, just quick to branch off. The SEC, you've got Auburn, Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. There's two of them. Is it going to be one, or is it going to be two, or is it going to be all four? Like, that's absurdly good teams in the SEC, the top half at least.
To make the playoff?
But, yeah.
I don't know. I think the SEC West will pan itself out. I think Georgia's got a fairly clear path as long as they stay undefeated and then go into the SEC title game with no losses. The SEC West will clear itself out. There will either be one team. There will be one team that comes out on top. I mean, unless all three of them, unless Alabama beats Auburn, Auburn beats LSU, and LSU beats Alabama, then it'll get confusing. I'm sure everything will even out, but right now, I mean, obviously the SEC's always been the dominant, football conference. They are absolutely killing it right now. And then you look at the ACC where, they've got Clemson up there, and Clemson looked okay against North Carolina. They survived a scare. But this was going around yesterday that if Clemson loses this game, they don't get into the playoff. I mean, a lot of people are saying that Clemson has to run the table. They have to win all 13 regular season and then the ACC championship games to get into the playoff. The SEC is very, very, very good, and it shows. Florida's not so far behind either. Florida's right there too. I don't know what Grant thinks, but I'm sure it's something similar.
Yeah, the AP poll actually just came out a few minutes ago, and Alabama jumped Clemson. So the AP voters agree that Clemson did not impress them enough to keep that number one spot against North Carolina. And I think, like you guys mentioned, I was baffled by that play call to go for two at the end of the game because I think that UNC was playing well. I mean, they were probably the better team, and I think the situation for me where I go for two is we have no business being in the situation. We're not going to win in overtime, so we'll go for two and try to win it here. But at that point, with there was 2.5 or 3 minutes left in the game, it wasn't even the very end of the game, and they're playing well. They have momentum. I really don't understand why you'd go for two there, and I think that if they had kicked the extra point, they would have had a good chance in overtime to make it interesting.
They were moving the ball pretty well.
They were moving the ball really well.
It's not like they were just getting, Clemson was just running all over the field. They held them to 21 points. They weren't, I mean, I see what Mac Brown was doing. I mean, you want to go for the win there, but I don't know. You're at home. I feel like why not just extend the game, see if something crazy could happen. But.
Yeah, and as far as the SEC, I think, like you said, it's pretty incredible how good they are. I don't see two teams from the SEC West making it unless there's some really weird situation, but I don't see a team not making the SEC title game and then making the playoff. I just think that's a really tough argument to make. I guess it was Ohio State that did that a couple years ago.
That didn't make, in 2014, the year that their only loss was to Virginia Tech.
But I think that it's a really tough argument that you didn't make your own conference championship and you want to make the playoff. It's not going to happen very often.
You got to win your conference. Yeah.
But it is a lot more interesting that, in this latest top five, you got Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. And then you also have Auburn number 7 and Florida number 10. Auburn and Florida play each other this week. That'll be a good game. But it's a lot more interesting when it's not just Alabama and then everybody else maybe down in the 20s. Like it's not a just given thing that Alabama's going to be in the playoff this year, that they're going to win. It's not even given that they're going to win the SEC West when you have a team like LSU in the top 5. So I think it'll be a lot more fun to watch, and it's cool that I feel like this is a really good college football season overall because I think we need that. I need to get my mind off of our program, and so it's good to have, some interesting things going on around the country to watch. I think it'll be a really fun season as we continue and get into conference play here.
Yeah, I think the ACC is hard to evaluate just because, they're probably the worst Power 5 conference right now.
Definitely.
They've got Clemson, and then they've got Virginia and Wake Forest in the top 25. Syracuse has underperformed. Everybody else in the ACC, Atlantic hasn't been great. Florida State has been average. They're facing their own problems. Then you go to the Coastal, where the only Virginia and North Carolina are solid, but Miami and Virginia Tech are looking very rough, or even worse than rough. I think it's going to be a tough season for the ACC. Pittsburgh almost lost to Delaware yesterday. You've just got ACC teams playing.
Boston College losing to Kansas.
Yeah, Boston College lost to Kansas, and Les Miles is a good head coach, but it's a lot of weird things going on in the ACC.
It's so inconsistent is the thing that's crazy to me. Like, you have Pitt beating UCF last week, and then they beat Delaware by 3 yesterday, a game which they trailed for a lot of the game. And you've had, Georgia Tech losing to the Citadel. They got blown out by Temple yesterday. But then, you have UNC losing to App, and then they take Clemson to the final minute and lose by 1. So it's so inconsistent. And I think it's really hard to evaluate because you don't know what you're going to get on a week-to-week basis. There are some teams where there are teams like Clemson where you're probably going to get a good performance. Yesterday wasn't great, but they still pulled out the win, which is gritty. You like to see that from a team that's expected to win. Sometimes you're going to struggle, but they pulled it out. But, outside of Clemson and maybe a couple of teams towards the bottom who are going to lose, it's difficult. I think the Coastal is wide open. I don't think the Hokies have a chance at it, but I think that it's wide open between, UNC, Duke, UVA. You got a lot of teams who could win it. And the Atlantic, you pretty much know who's going to win, but there's still a lot of questions there about Wake, Boston College, Florida State. How good are they? Florida State pretty much took NC State to the woodshed yesterday. So
I feel like the ACC as a whole is just in a lot of turnover. A lot of new coaches, a lot of programs trying to rebuild themselves. Like Florida State, they're struggling to rebuild. Miami has a new coach. Louisville's rebuilding technically still, but I think this year more than anything, it's going to be really clear how much we need more than 4 playoff spots, just because there's going to be a really, really good football team getting left out. Whether it's Oklahoma in the Big 12, you have 5 Power 5 conferences and you can only take 4 teams in the playoffs. So I feel like that's really going to show out this year. Ohio State looks incredible. Justin Fields is so good. I don't know, why was that game day too? That was never going to be a good game. That was never going to be a good game.
I think it was more of Nebraska's 3-1. They're on the rise with Scott Frost, and game day hasn't been there in forever. And to be fair, Nebraska has one of the best home field advantages in all of college football.
They sell out every time.
Yeah, they sell out every. I think they've sold out every single game for 5-10 years straight. Nebraska Memorial Stadium is amazing. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's going to be tough, and that's why people have been saying, if Clemson loses, if Oklahoma loses, if Ohio State loses, somebody's going to get left out because the SEC is too good. And then you have the Pac-12 where, I don't even know who's going to win the Pac-12. Washington beat USC last night. The Pac-12's a toss-up, and the Pac-12 doesn't have one front runner like every other conference. Yeah. The other conferences do, but yeah, it's going to be really interesting about the playoff conversation once we get into October, which is this week.
Crazy.
Yeah. Now we're going to transition to NFL. We've got about 8 minutes left. Some score updates. The Titans lead the Falcons 24-7 with 2 minutes left in the second quarter. The Patriots lead the Bills 13-0 with 2 minutes left in the second quarter. The Chiefs and the Lions are tied at 10. The Raiders lead the Colts 21-10. The Chargers lead the Dolphins 17-10. The Giants lead Wyatt's Redskins, 14-3.
Bears fan.
Oh, Bears fan. You were watching the game. I figured you were right. Redskins fan. The Browns lead the Ravens 10-7, and the Panthers lead the Texans 10-3. Wyatt's Bears play at 4:25, and Grant's Broncos play at 4:25. So, what are some NFL games you guys are looking forward to today?
Definitely Bears Vikings. That's going to be it's a big divisional matchup. I'm really nervous for that one. But biggest takeaway after watching these first few weeks of the NFL season is just Patrick Mahomes looks like the best quarterback of all time already. And what he's doing, his team, they score 30 points automatically every game, and it's something like I've never really seen before. And they just have so much speed outside. Andy Reid's been one of the best play callers forever. And I don't know, are they beating the Lions right now? But
it's 13-10 Lions. The Lions took a 10-0 lead in that game, and then Chiefs tied it at 10, and the Lions just kicked a field goal just a second ago, so now it's 13-10.
All right, yeah. So either way, Patrick Mahomes is probably going to win MVP again this year. He's going to throw more than 50 touchdowns. It really sucks when we traded up to draft Trubisky and we could have just waited, but I'm going to be positive about it.
Game to watch this weekend, and what have you seen so far, like first few weeks of the NFL season?
Well, I think one of the games to watch is Browns-Ravens. That's a big divisional game.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of see how that division's going to go. The Browns didn't start the way that they had hoped. For the first time in a while they had a lot of hype, and they kind of came out flat. But I think that's still a wide-open division. The Steelers are in some trouble without Roethlisberger and with Connor not playing as well as he did last year. But I think that's a big divisional game. The Browns are up 10-7 at halftime. I'll be interested to see the second half of that one. And then, like Wyatt said, the Cowboys-Saints. I think the Saints looked pretty good last week against the Seahawks, even though they didn't have Breeze. Bridgewater looked really good. And so it's kind of a big game for both teams because the Cowboys are undefeated, but we don't really know how good they are. They haven't really played anyone that great. And the Saints, it's how good can we be with Teddy Bridgewater until Drew Brees gets back. So I think that's a big game to watch.
I will add about the Saints. I think Alvin Kamara, this might be a little bit of a hot take. I think he's by far the best running back in the NFL, and I feel like if they just keep giving him the ball, they can win a lot of games without Drew Brees. I was going to say that. Also, Dwayne Haskins just got a text. Dwayne Haskins just entered the game for the Redskins.
Yeah, so Redskins aren't rolling with Case Keenum anymore. Haskins is playing. Surprise for those Redskins.
One thing I can say as a Broncos fan is that Case Keenum is the worst, so putting Haskins in is probably a really good idea.
Let's stay positive, Grant. But yeah, like they said, the Chiefs now trail the Lions 13-10 with a minute left in the second quarter. Any final takeaways? We got a couple minutes left. Any final takeaways? Virginia Tech, football, basketball, whatever, NFL, MLB. I don't know. What do you guys have?
The MLB is interesting. It's coming down to the wire for a lot of NL teams. I think I'm a Rockies fan. It's interesting because the Brewers basically needed to win one game in Colorado this weekend in order to clinch the division, and they haven't been able to do it. The Rockies have won 2 in a row, so it's kind of a little silver lining to a really terrible season that we're kind of keeping the Brewers from being able to drink champagne in our locker room, which is nice. We'll see what happens today. But yeah, I think that NL is really interesting. I'm trying to pull up the standings right now.
Dodgers, I'm really interested to see if the Dodgers can just snap. They've kind of been a cursed team if you look at the past. They just keep going to the NLCS World Series and just getting their heart broken every single time. And if there's a year to do it, if it's going to happen, it has to be this year. But the MLB playoffs should be interesting. The AL, I think, by far has the better teams. Like the Astros and the Yankees, I think, are a lot better than anyone. By far better than anyone minus the Dodgers on the NL. But it's going to be fun.
Matt Atkins, if you're listening, I'm happy because my Oakland Athletics made the playoffs. I try to keep up with baseball as much as I can. I'm not a grown up. I didn't grow up watching baseball or keeping up with it, but I have become an Athletics fan, and the Athletics did make the playoffs. So that'll be interesting. But besides that, Virginia Tech football, that my final thing is it's going to be a big game this week. I don't think it's going to be as big as the Duke game, but it's going to be very telling, like Wyatt said earlier. If they come out, if they fix something during this week, which, I mean, is highly unlikely at this point, but if they figure something out, then, I mean, for all we know, as much as this season has gone downhill, I mean, we started decently high, and it's just kind of gone straight downhill. For all we know, the Hokies could come out and shock us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but it could happen. But like we said, Hokies have another big game coming up against Miami. I don't know. Grant, final take?
Yeah, I guess my final take would just be I want to see some urgency when the Hokies come out on Saturday. Like you said, it's a big opportunity, and it's not a game we're expected to win. I just saw Norm Wood tweeted we opened as 8.5-point underdogs. I don't even think that we need to win the game necessarily for me to feel better. I just want to see us come out with some urgency, look like we understand the importance of where we're at and the importance of kind of turning things around and keeping it a close game. I think would make me feel a lot better. I don't want to get blown out again. That's going to make me pretty concerned about where we are if that happens.
Mm-hmm. Definitely just like, I don't know, like Dave said, I'm not too optimistic about the football team right now, but maybe we can figure something out. There's a lot of dudes in that locker room that I think want to win, and it sucks to see, but maybe they can figure some things out, tweak the offense a little, but we'll see.
Well, as always, thanks to Matt, the engineer, for making sure we got on air, and thank you all for listening to WUVT's Sports Roundtable. For Grant Atkinson and Wyatt Krueger, I'm David Cunningham, and this has been a production of WUVT 90.7 FM Blacksburg.